On today's episode of 6-1 Forward, I'm joined by Mayor Jadwin of Gahanna to talk about all things new and in the past of what's been going on here in a suburb of Columbus. Mayor Jadwin, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
It's been a while since we've seen each
I
other.
know. I was trying to remember, like 2 years maybe?
Feels that way at least. So I thought we could start our conversation today talking about Gahanna. And I was doing some research. And there's a couple interesting facts. One is about an herb.
We are the herb capital of Ohio.
Which is interesting. And why is that?
So that was, let's see, what year was it? 1972, I think it was.
Yeah.
So there was a Gahanna resident by the name of Jane Bunny Giroux. And Gahanna back in the early 70s was really just starting to evolve as a community with housing being built, et cetera. And Bunny had she was very much into gardening. And there was a developer who made a comment to her. The story goes that a developer made the comment that Gahanna was never going to be anything more than, a bunch of houses. And she didn't take a liking to that. And she decided Gahanna needed to be known for something. And she had this vision that Gahanna should be the herb capital, and we could have, McCormick's come with spices, and like she went down the whole path of what she thought Gahanna could be from that. But she petitioned the Ohio State House. Joanne Davidson was at the State House at the time, and they worked together. And Gahanna was named the herb capital of Ohio in 1972. So it's been 53 years now.
Who knew?
Mm-hmm. And actually, the gardens right outside City Hall are the Giroux Herb Gardens, named after her husband, Al, and Bunny.
That's a great story. I had no idea. When we talk about Gahanna, tell us about how many people live here and what the makeup of Gahanna is.
Sure. Well, one of the things I love most about Gahanna is the diversity of our community. And that is in every sense of the word, from age, race, culture, socioeconomic status. That has been, I think, a source of pride for our community. The last census, I think in 2020, was 35,726 people. So we say roughly 36,000 people right now.
Do you forecast, or when you look forward, do you have projections of how big or how many more people might be coming to Gahanna in the next decade?
Yeah, we know we're going to grow.
Sure.
The whole region is growing. This part of the state is the epicenter of growth right now. Are we going to grow? Yes, we're not going to grow 10,000 people. Projections are maybe 4,000 over the next decade or more.
You've been in office since 2020.
January of 2020.
A lot has changed in Gahanna, Central Ohio, since you've taken office.
Absolutely.
You've had a vision for a long time that you really saw potential and opportunity and places for new redevelopment, new ways to look at Gahanna and the growth. One of those I know we've talked about is Creekside. So talk to us about what the history of Creekside is.
Sure.
I don't think people realize how long Creekside has been here.
No, Creekside is 18
wild?
years old already. So maybe it would help too, but even by explaining what I was doing before becoming mayor. So I was practicing lawyer for 27 years, but volunteering in the community. And eventually, the circuitous path led me to become the executive director of Visit Gahanna.
Okay.
So I was responsible for marketing and promoting the city. Our office was in Creekside. I spent every day, dealing with the businesses and working with those businesses in the Creekside district and listening to them with regard to their challenges and the lack of foot traffic, what we were seeing. But at the same time, we're bringing visitors here, and we would greet visitors from around the state of Ohio, sometimes outside the state of Ohio, who would walk around and say, I love this place. Why don't we have any place like this in my community? So you had this really strange dichotomy of, on one hand, residents saying, what's wrong with Creekside? And on the other hand, other people, visitors coming saying, this is fantastic. But at the end of the day, the businesses have been suffering for 17 years. So the question has always been why?
Why?
And when I was at Visit Gahanna, started having those conversations. With, I brought in Roger Brooks, who's a national, if not international, expert in placemaking, who came in and secret shopped Gahanna for a week and then did a 3-hour presentation on here's what I saw, everything from signage and wayfinding to redevelopment opportunities. And, I remember he and I standing on the plaza at Creekside and him talking about, you need more people down here. You need people living down here and ideas for what we should do with the plaza and how we could activate the area to make it more engaging. So those conversations have been happening for a long time. And I can honestly, I can even go back to 2009, 2010, because I was the board president of Visit Gahanna back then. And at that point, the city was already doing a survey amongst the community about like, what should we do with Creekside? And it had only been open a year and a half. But when Creekside opened, the timing could not have been worse.
It was awful.
You know, Creekside opened, and it really was one of the first private-public partnerships. You know, you look at Bridge Parking, and well, that was what Creekside was supposed to be. But you know, right after it opened, then the recession hit, and I don't know that it ever fully recovered and was able to recover from that. Which also I think impacted further development in that area. The original plan for Creekside was to develop all of Mill Street, and that never really happened for many, many reasons. Obviously, again, I'll point to the recession as being a leading driver there. But I think that's a big part of why Creekside hasn't been successful. Is we never finished the development down there.
Do you think, or maybe is part of where the challenge was density and housing and people?
That's what we have been hearing from expert after expert. I mentioned Roger Brooks. We've had economic development experts coming in. We just this past year had a gentleman by the name of Josiah Brown. So we were working on our Gahanna strategic plan this past year, and also developing a comprehensive transportation and mobility plan. Josiah Brown came in as part of that. We had Jeff Speck come in, who's talking about, BRT and transit-oriented development and the future, and working with communities around the nation in that regard. And every single one of them have told us the same thing. You need more people down here. You need people down here from 8 to 5 who are working, but then you need people coming home and being down here from 5 p.m. on, who are going to come down to that area, visit the restaurants, and we need to add things to do and reasons for them to be down there. You can only come down and eat at the same restaurant so many times, right? We need to have that space available for people to come down.
To your credit, in my past work life, I was working at a place that was supporting some of those studies and some of those efforts. And not everybody understands or is aware that it's more than just a housing study and looking at that piece. You looked at the roads. You looked at whether or not the roads were too wide. You looked at every single piece and part. And I think that's really important to do, especially as you're thinking about transit and how we're going to move people. You saw the whole picture.
And we're still working on that.
Of course.
There's no one easy answer to it. And Gahanna is a challenge period because we're pretty much developed. We don't have a lot of available land. We're not going to be able to add single family neighborhoods. We don't have land for that. So if we're adding housing to meet job needs and to meet those demands, then we have to look at what we call infill and redevelopment. And we have to go vertical. We're not going to be going horizontal. So where is it appropriate for us to add that type of development? We're just not going to add it, but where does it fit the best? The Creekside project, we have a Creekside project we're talking about right now, adding some needed housing, mixed use down there, retail, restaurant space, a hotel. But that project was born out of a redevelopment strategy. And that came from years of struggling with a proposed project down there that was apartments. And it was something the mayor previous to me, had been dealing with and negotiating for 4 years. I came into office in January 2020, picked up the negotiations in that, and we were 18 months in. And I remember sitting here saying, if it's this hard, it's not the right project. It shouldn't be this hard. And what do we need to do to get the development that we, the community, want to see in our area? And a development consultant I was working with at the time said, well, Mayor, you've got to control the property.
Right.
Like, great. What does that mean? Like, how do we do that? Well, you need to have a strategy. Okay, great. How do we do that? And that's when we launched the work on the redevelopment strategy that looked at our land use plan. It looked at the old Gahanna vision plan. It took every plan we ever did and consolidated it. And then we did community surveys. But we also engaged the private development community, because ultimately, if the private development folks don't want to invest in it because they don't see value in it, then it doesn't really matter what we want to build down there. So it has to be that blend of what does the community want to see their city be, and what is the private development community willing to invest in? What do they see the value in doing? So that's where the strategy came from.
I'm curious, when you came into office and then began to have those conversations with what the community wanted, What was the vision for the redevelopment of Creekside back then versus what it might be now?
That's a great question. I mean, the original plans for Creekside way back when were, if I remember correctly, I wasn't in office at the time, but as a resident, what I remember is, I mean, there were plans to pattern it after San Antonio, the Riverwalk, and there was going to be like a lazy river that came up and crossed Mill Street and went back down again. I mean, there were some pretty elaborate plans. They were beautiful. Realistic I don't know long term, but there certainly was supposed to be development on both sides of the street, and adding housing and adding things like that. I have to go back and pull what those exact plans were at this point, but it was all along both sides, west and east side of Mill Street. And again, that, we did one section of the west side of Mill Street. And unfortunately, I don't think we ever added the rooftops to support what was built on the west side.
So there's been progress in where you thought it might be versus today. What does it look like in the future?
Oh.
And I know there's a lot of variables you can't control, but maybe the immediate future, maybe beyond.
Creekside? Yeah. Well, I mentioned we have a project pending right now. It's we've been having conversations with the community now for almost 2 months. And we're calling it Creekside Reimagined. But the private development project is a $100 million.
Which is incredible.
I know. And it's all private development money. And there's been some confusion in the community because of what Creekside was initially. This is not that. This is the private developer's investment of $100 million for a mixed-use project that would add 2 restaurant spaces, co-working space, a boutique hotel, 263 apartments, and then an above-the-garage self-supporting parking garage, above-the-ground self-supporting parking garage. So that would help provide parking for the hotel, for the restaurant use, and as well as the apartments, and then have some public space in addition to that. So that would be both the west side and east side of Mill Streets, and then phase 2 would be adding townhomes. So projected owner-occupied townhomes to add to that diversity of housing and getting the people down there with a disposable income, and the young professionals and the folks like me who are empty nesters that I don't need my 4-bedroom house anymore, but I don't have a place to move. So, where can I move within the community that I can let a family move into my house, but still be in the community I love?
Well, I think it's important to mention, or worth mentioning, that with the success of Bridge Park, communities across Central Ohio are reevaluating how many dollars are leaving to go to other places and spaces to spend and to have entertainment and all of those aspects. So communities now feel that it's really important to offer that, keep the dollars, and have that as a community benefit.
Absolutely. And we just did a study on that to learn how much, just in restaurant dollars, how many dollars leave the city of Gahanna. That's something like 60 million. It might be even more than that. My jaw dropped. Yes. And I probably get verification on that from Director Gaki, but I think it was like 60 million. It might even been higher than that. Leave the city every year. And I sat back and I went, I'm part of that too.
Yeah. So people leaving and then trying to capture and make sure that there's an offering here for all of the residents to enjoy and appreciate.
Yeah, we're always hearing feedback from residents too about what kind of restaurants do you want to see? Vegan and gluten free, and the types of places that offer that diversity to meet the growing needs of the community. So we try to work with developers and say, hey, if you can find somebody like this, that would be great. We pick up the phone and call and say, sometimes it's, hey, Chick-fil-A, would you, are you interested in coming to Gahanna? Right. We do all of those things and to try to bring the type of diversity of offerings to our community that we know our community wants to see.
And I want to talk about economic development, but before doing so, I want to talk about where Gahanna is with housing, because those two things go hand in hand. And I haven't heard much just in my world about, I know you have a shortage, or as everyone does in Central Ohio. How are you feeling about the housing situation in Gahanna today?
We're still far behind. Yeah. So the city did an economic development strategy in 2015, I think it was. And that strategy said that it projected that we needed to add, I think it was like 750 housing units by 2025 to meet the projected demand and growth that was projected in 2015. That was before Intel. That was before the Columbus region just exploded with growth. When I took office in 2020, we had it was less than 100 that had been added. So since I've taken office, we've added right now in terms of what's been constructed, I think it's about 150 that have been added. We have 294 units at Casto's building down at the Crescent and Central Woods. Stonehenge's building 251 multifamily units up on Morse Road. But even if you total all those up, that doesn't even meet the projected need from 10 years ago. Then you have the adjusted need in terms of what we've seen in growth over the last 5 years. We've added something like 1,500 to 2,000 new jobs in the community over the last 5 years. People don't want to drive 20 to 25 minutes to commute. They want to live, work, and stay in the same community. We've hired people here at the city, and they've wanted to live in the city.
Sure.
And they can't find a place.
Sure.
And they can't find out. I mentioned earlier being an empty nester.
Right.
There's folks that I know who are moving out because they want to downsize, and there's nothing available for them. So how do we meet that, what I call bookend?
Correct.
Housing, the young professional housing at the beginning of your career, and then the empty nesters like me who I need to downsize for my house. I'm not ready to move to an assisted living facility yet, but where can I go that I can still be in my community? So adding that housing to fit both ends of the spectrum is something we've been trying to focus on.
When you and I met, however long ago now, couple years, it was around Intel, and there was a real sense of urgency across Central Ohio. And I know you were planning for, and you really were diving into what that could look like from a growth perspective, pain points, the whole gamut.
Right.
Now that is a questionable project, how are you feeling about the sense of urgency? Do you have time now? Do you feel a little relief? Do you feel like some of the planning that you were able to do has helped in other ways?
No, I honestly, first of all, let me just start with, my personal belief is that the projected deadline of that project ever being done when it was said it was going to be done was unrealistic. I think it was aggressive, to be polite. Yes. And honestly, I believe that project will still happen. There's too much that's been invested in that. And what that manufacturing plant would do is too important to the country to let that project fail. So that is, again, personal belief. But I don't believe that the delay is a bad thing because it gives us time from a region to truly evaluate what we need to have in place from an infrastructure standpoint. And that was my concern as a community 10 minutes away. We were not part of the conversation. A lot of and Betsy, you and I have talked about this, and I'm not going to say anything to you that I haven't said to some of my peers around the region as well, is that, so many of those conversations that were happening around Intel in that very first year were talking about Intel East.
That's right.
And I remember being in a meeting at one point, probably the 6th or 7th presentation of one of those, and I finally raised my hand and said, "Can you go back to the slide?
Gahanna over there?
Can you go back to that map? You see that left corner of that map? Like, that's my community.
Right.
They're not just going to drop into Intel and drive east. They're going to come up through Gahanna. So where are we having that conversation around what does the traffic impact look like? What does the housing impact look like? How are we providing for the infrastructure? Because water's going to flow down through and it's going to come through, come through Gahanna. What are the impacts to communities like Gahanna, Bexley, Reynoldsburg, Whitehall? And I was appreciative of the fact that conversation really started to broaden. And not just because of me, because the mayors in those communities were saying the same thing. We were all working together. So I do think the delay is a good thing because it does give us as an entire region the opportunity to plan more strategically. The state is now involved, and I love the governor's projects that he has put behind to support infrastructure and investments in that regard. So, I think that pause, that little breath really just gives us better time.
So as we pivot with Intel and the economic development around it, because we were talking about whether or not there were going to be businesses that ended up in Gahanna, I'm sure the economic development piece hasn't stopped for you. And we were talking before we started today about the amount of food manufacturing and development that happens in Gahanna, but there are a lot of other industries here too. And I was wondering if you might be able to speak to what all is happening here from that side?
Yeah, we've the last 5 years, we've just seen tremendous growth. And the best thing about it has really been diversified growth, because you don't want to be focused only on one sector, because when that one sector has its problems, and it will, every sector does, then your whole economy goes down. So having that diversity within your economy is a stronghold. And that's something we've done. Over the last, again, 5 years, we've seen tremendous growth in probably about 4 or 5 areas. The medical field has been huge for us. The Crescent at Central Park just really has been a transformative project. It is a 100+ acre parcel right at Hamilton and 270. Ortho One, you can see them there now. That was a tremendous project for us. But I think there's probably 24 medical providers that now exist in that area. Central Ohio Urology Group was the first one that are doing cutting edge laser surgery. People travel from around the country to get their surgery here in Gahanna. I mean, it's incredible what's that cutting edge innovative approach. Now we have Orthopedic One, that is the largest physician-owned orthopedic practice, but the #1 orthopedic practice in the state. And they're right here in Gahanna and chose Gahanna, and we're thrilled to have them here. But then that area just evolving in terms of the mixed use of it, adding the office and the medical, adding the housing is part of that, and then parkland associated with that as well. So the medical sector is one. Food and beverage is another one. Donato's has been here forever. We're very proud of the fact that their corporate headquarters are right here in Gahanna.
It's awesome.
Almost 50 years. But it's not just Donato's. And you have the Grody Company, which celebrated their 50th anniversary. They're renovating and expanding their location. They manufacture the food processing equipment that goes in the Donato stores and elsewhere, and they're a global company. We have Simple Times, which is growing exponentially and continues to expand its space. The cocktail mix company that their sustainable practices and the way Mark approaches his business is, again, cutting edge, innovative. Then we have Noble Cut Distillery, which I remember Tony Guilfoy when he started that business, and we partnered with them back when I was running the Creekside Blues and Jazz Festival. And they were just a really small little business, and his business continues to expand. They are now in multiple states, partnered with Miranda Lambert restaurants, Jason Aldean restaurants. You can find them in Las Vegas. Their limoncello won first place in an international competition in Italy.
Ooh.
I'm just going to throw that in there. I know. We're going there.
We're all going.
And we're going there right after this, as a matter of fact.
Maybe.
You got to benchmark, Betsy.
Right?
So, but that is a sector, again, that's had wonderful growth for us. Manufacturing and logistics, you talked about Intel. Mm-hmm. So those folks who want to be in the area, maybe it's not Intel, and they might not even be an Intel supplier, but they're a tertiary supplier. Sure. And they want to be here because of the growth that's happening 10 minutes away from us. So we've, life science industry is an area we've seen growth in that regard. And then just what I call health and wellness. So a lot of mental health facilities, the kind of the spas and the aesthetics and all of those types of businesses, those small mom and pop businesses, they're important to adding really the quality of life, absolutely, amenities that communities need to have.
And people are looking for that.
Correct.
So you talk about the commercial side and new buildings, but there's also been public buildings that have happened within your time as mayor. Some of those, a new school.
We have a brand new high school. Our school district, this January, we'll open a brand new high school. So the students, I know that is tremendous for our community. And even though that's not a city project, sure, a lot of people think the city run the schools. I don't. But the voters in Gahanna supported that project. 2018, I think, was when the levy was passed. But that new high school really sets up the community for decades. And in fact, I remember when the Intel folks came through and they were visiting communities, and they said we were the only community they had visited that was preparing for the future with growth that way with the school district. And I'm just excited for the kids. So the kids in the high school, after the holiday season ends this year, or later in December, they'll leave the old high school, go on winter break. And January 10th, when they come back to school, they'll be in a brand new high school.
That's awesome. Congrats to everybody in Gahanna on that.
That'll be great. And then 2 months after that, we'll celebrate the grand opening of our new Gahanna Civic Center. which is a project we've been working on for a number of years now.
Can you talk about that for a little bit?
I would love to.
What's going to be the Civic Center project?
Sure. So this started, sometimes you kind of pull a thread and you never really quite know where it's going to go. And again, a little bit of history for anybody that really is interested in that. Back in 2005, there had been an assessment done of the city facilities. And in 2005, 20 years ago, it was determined we were 100,000 square feet shy of what we needed to operate efficiently.
Huh.
So
Back
then, that was in 2005. 2017, Mayor Nealon then started a kind of an update refresh on that facilities assessment because nothing had been done. And they got through certain phases of that facilities assessment and didn't really have the opportunity to finish it. I came into office in 2020, and sometime in 2020, Kevin Schultz, who's now my senior director of operations, was in my office for a touch base, and I said, "Hey, Kevin, we got to finish this. This was never finished. We got to finish this up." So we finished the assessment. We presented it to council in I think it was fall of 21. January of 22, we started just informal workshops with council. Here's what the facilities assessment have said. The 1 and 2 priorities, and really 1A and 1B, because they were both critical, was our police headquarters, because the building is just, it's in bad shape. And then our service complex. So we have our service and parks complex down by Friendship Park, built in 1971. Doesn't have heat in the winter, doesn't have air in the summer. And that's where, the guys are working on a water line in 0-degree temperatures. That's where they go back to work. And we need new space. Plus we can't, when we buy our salt for the winter months, we actually rent space from New Albany because we don't have enough space to keep our supply here. So we need to adjust that. And there's many more reasons for that as well. But those were 1A and 1B. Then the next priority was City Hall, because this building was renovated in 94, I think is when it moved in. We were out of space 6 months after we opened here. We've turned closets into offices. The building has been rewired so many times. When you think about when computers came into offices, right? 92, 93. Right. So this building wasn't even wired for how we, from a technological standpoint, do business today. So it's just really challenging for us. And then from a public safety standpoint, the world today is a lot different than it was 30 years ago. So there's those concerns. So we started doing workshops with council. And at one point they said, you know what, why don't you go out, take a look around. Let's look at the police headquarters. Let's see if we can find some land. Land in Gahanna is hard to find, even with a magnifying glass. And we just happened to literally drive by a building that had been, it was vacated when COVID happened. It was a 100,000 square foot building, and it was just sitting empty. And I was driving the car, and Kevin was in the car with me, with my Becky Whittington, who was my assistant then. And I'm like, what is that building? We should look at that building.
Could that be?
Yeah. What is that? And we got inside, and as we were walking around it, we were like, this could work. This could meet our needs with, adding some additional space on. The building was in great shape. Long story short, council ended up approving the purchase of that building by November of 22. We started the design work on that in 23, and we're projected to move in late February, early March of next year. One building will house our entire police headquarters, all of our city hall operations, and the senior center, which the senior center will create 116% more programmable space than they currently have.
That's awesome.
So, and what the most important part was, when we were looking at just building a police headquarters, our estimated costs then were $70 million without any land acquisition. This project is less than that, will be less than that overall investment. So addressing 3 facility needs in one for less money, and we're set for the next 30 years.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It's a lot of times, I know sometimes your taxpayers don't understand what are they doing that for? The building's fine. Well, it's not really. And we talk about public safety and having facilities that truly are reflective of the quality of policing that we expect our division to deliver. I'm so excited for them. The space that our officers will have and our dispatchers will have from a training standpoint, from what happens when they see a fatal crash and they come back. And right now they have no room to just sit and be and compose themselves and to have that space. But it's going to be phenomenal. And I can't wait to invite the community in. It'll be great.
You've accomplished a lot.
We have a lot going on.
You have.
It's been busy.
I'm not sure that people maybe within a community always recognize until they go to look at a different community to see just how much has changed and progress in a positive way here. As you look forward, what do you see for Gahanna in the next 10 years?
Well, obviously Creekside. I'd love to see Creekside really live up to the potential that it was intended to have in the first place, and it's there. It's we just need to kind of get that fine tuning piece to it that we need to have. But then I think that is also a catalyst for whatever else happens. We have to look at housing, we have to look at traffic, and it's not just how the traffic being impacted by what we're doing in the community, but the traffic that's around us.
You've got a lot of traffic.
We do have a lot, but it's you have Jefferson Township and what's happening to the east and what's happening to the northeast. That traffic comes through Gahanna. We're going to have traffic whether we add folks or not. So how do we best align for that and prepare for that? And that's something that we're working on. I mentioned the comprehensive transportation and mobility plan that will help guide that. We just passed the strategic plan and adopted that, which was a year-long effort to involve the community. We really chose to take a community-focused approach to that. We had 3 rounds of public engagement of various forms, and I like to say it's a plan by the community for the community. It sets their vision. So now my job and the job of my administration is to take that plan and say, okay, how do we accomplish what the community is telling us? What are the projects that we see and how do those align? And then what projects aren't we seeing that meet the community's goals for us? And making sure that we're being transparent to our residents and our stakeholders on what we're doing and how we're doing it.
It's really interesting how you are very strategic in how you operate as a mayor, but also the way that you look at it from a leadership perspective and how you're really a conduit for the residents of Gahanna and of service to them. And kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. My dad, that's why I was visiting a small business this morning. It's an organization here that works with individuals with disabilities, and one of the questions they asked me was, did you always think you would work in government? And I said, no, I never wanted to work in government because I grew up with my dad. My dad was a police officer, school board member, council member. He was a state senator, and that was before social media. He was 3-term state senator in Pennsylvania, and we used to go to the mall and, we would walk in and we'd get stopped and we'd be there for an hour. And my mom and I would end up just leaving. My dad would come back 3 hours later and he'd be in the same seat. And that was, like I said, it was before social media started. And I always thought, I could never do all what he's doing. But I realized now what I was learning was that passion for helping your community. And I don't view myself, in fact, he used to get mad when people called him a politician. And I could never understand that, but I do now. Because it's not about politics. There's no political agenda. It's about being a public servant. It's about serving your community and just trying to make a difference. And that's what I live by. And as the mayor, my job, I'm the chief executive officer of the city. My job is to make sure that those professional staff members that we hire and the 12 or so departments that we have are doing their jobs, and that we're doing it strategically and smartly and transparency with accountability, and that we are maximizing those investments of dollars. And, maybe that's my legal practice. Maybe that's my event practice, event planning. I don't know. That certainly helped during COVID. But that's how I approach every day. And I'm accountable to the residents. If the residents don't like what we're doing, I have this thing here, the buck stops here. Somebody gave that to me as a gift. My first day, and I keep it there, and it reminds me that whatever happens in the city, it's my responsibility, and I carry that weight very seriously.
You can tell.
The bag's under my eyes.
No. Thank you so much, Mayor Jadwin, for your time today and sharing all the happenings in Gahanna.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for the time. I always enjoy our conversations. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.